The Renaissance of the 15th century was a burst of creativity in arts, literature, architecture, the sciences, and more. What many of you may not know is that it was in direct response to Europe moving past the plague. People across all walks of life were dying at alarming rates, but once they got the plague under control, it led to this period of rebirth. Like soaring up into the sky, this period of dramatic change was really scary, but the possibilities were amazing. And as we prepare for our own plague to end, we are entering our own period of rebirth, our own renaissance, what I call the digital renaissance. I'm Edward Roske, CEO at Interel. I'm joined today by Joe Altman, who not only oversees all our strategic assessments, he also coordinates our State of Business Analytics survey every single year, including handling all the analytics. We also have Stefan Ronchetti, who not only heads up pre-sales for us, he helped put all of this analysis together into a really great presentation. If I appear tall during this presentation, it's because I'm standing on the backs of these two giants, as well as a third giant, Ali Flint. I mentioned this on prior State of Business Analytics webcasts, but SOBA, State of Business Analytics, is really her brainchild. The Renaissance ran through the 15th and 16th centuries, and while it brought about a world-impacting change, it took a couple hundred years. Now pause for a moment and realize how much our world has changed just in the last year. When we're trying to understand what's going to happen, remember, it's always hardest to see it when you're down at ground level, experiencing all the change that's happening. If you rise up a little bit, you can see the landscape, you can see what's coming. Are there obstacles? Sure. You can't see through all the fog of the future because in some cases, you're down there at the ground level having to deal with firefighting. Our challenge is preparing for that future that is positive, but it is uncertain. But to be clear, it's the details that are uncertain. The big picture is actually pretty clear. And the key thing that's clear, the key thing that we have to do is to ensure that we are not being transformed by the world, but that we are transforming the world rather than things happening to us. Today is about planning how we are going to go out and take control of our future. We surveyed over 225 companies this year. And as many of you know, we normally skew towards Fortune 500 companies. So this year, we made an attempt to add some companies down in the mid-size space too, kind of under 2 billion a year USD in revenue. This gives us a better picture of software usage across various vendors, for instance. One of the things we really wanted to ask this year was how well companies are using those 5 tools that we talked about throughout 2020 to help get through uncertain times and a changing economy. How were they using scenario planning? How were they taking advantage of strategic modeling, profitability and cost management, data visualization? Were they using narrative reporting to open up a dialogue about their numbers? And here's what we found. A whopping 79% of companies report they're not using the tools or they're not using them effectively. On a more encouraging note, 53% of you do say that they are getting better at using their tools. At the same time, almost no one feels, like under 2%, that they have mastered the tool set. This is not the most encouraging result, but it does show really strongly that companies are aware that we need to get better in this area. To that end, we asked, what did companies learn about themselves and their EPM processes as a result of the changes that were brought about by the pandemic? What deficiencies were exposed that impacted their ability to make agile adjustments, to pivot as the pandemic was hitting them in the face? Well, the amount of time it takes to do planning and forecasting and reporting was a clear issue. They said we wanted to change faster, but 32% of companies didn't realize how long it actually takes when you want to make a new scenario, when you want to make a change. We talked to a bunch of companies in 2020 who just simply didn't have enough time to do all they really wanted to do to drive that agile change. On scenario modeling, I almost feel like this one should have come in at number 1 because of how many companies we talked to had trouble managing all the different versions that they were creating for their forecasts and how many different scenarios they were actually attempting to model. We got a lot of project work helping companies with these top 2 issues. And number 4, too manual. We can see that some companies did have difficulty with that manual side. Other companies had difficulty with people working remotely, but not very many got completely stuck in analysis paralysis, which is good. And this part's really interesting. Very few people, it was the lowest of the things we asked about. 12% of people cited lack of tools as a problem that got exposed. It's the least cited reason where people said they had trouble. So compare that to earlier when we saw how many people are not using their tools effectively to deal with the pandemic. And we see that while people seem to own the tools that they need, they haven't brought themselves up to speed well enough on actually using them. We're seeing an opportunity here for companies either to get trained on tools that they have in place or to implement tools that they own yet haven't gone through the steps to build them out and activate them for the benefit of the business. So just like the pandemic exposed different companies in different ways, their responses also varied. No surprise as well, when we asked people what actions they took, number one, working remotely, stopping travel, those two are way in the lead. Scenario modeling has a strong presence being used at just over half of the companies, so that's good. We see upwards of 40% of companies either stop hiring or they have to furlough people or flat out terminate them. That is a lot, if you think about it, of reactive, defensive strategies coming in at really higher percentage levels. We don't see as much action on some of the more proactive steps, like doing profitability analysis, narrative reporting, so you can talk about why you're headed down a certain path, implementing real-time analytics. Those are the things that I want to see more companies doing, because those are the things that are going to have the longer term lasting effects. Those are the things that are going to make sure your enterprise is more agile and more healthy as you go not just into 2021, but all the way to 2025 and beyond. So my advice to all of you, take some proactive steps, get over that hump in that tool effectiveness chart and move out of the not using or trying or improving, get into that using effectively. Perfect world, get over into master the tools so that you're looking for additional tools because you've gotten everything you possibly can out of the tools that you own. We also asked an open-ended question about what is the most pressing concern about the pandemic's impact on the functions of the CFO's office. We got a lot of insightful input here, and I decided to make it a word cloud from everyone's thoughts. So taken as a whole, people's inputs paint a picture of uncertainty, which is not terribly surprising, and concern about what normal means now and what it's going to mean in the future. It's interesting, the word sure actually does appear. It's just below well on the center left. We went back and looked at the inputs. The reason the word sure appeared is it was always preceded by the word not. But if you think about it, this is what is on people's minds. What are we doing from home? What are we doing with our analysis? How can we work to have a financial impact? How can our business revenue increase? How can we forecast the impacts of that pandemic? But now 2020 is over, and no offense 2020, but good riddance. So we're planning our scenarios for 2021, and we need to pivot from being backward looking about potential scenarios to being proactive about the scenarios we want to happen. We have to take a pause, we have to look ahead, and we have to say, maybe what are the most plausible scenarios for 2021 to 2025? It could be global expansion. It could be digital transformation. It could be rethinking what our culture means to be in a remote world. It could be pandemic take two, knock on wood, that doesn't happen. It could be let's redefine how we interact to better grow. It could be anything. Scenario management is what I call taking scenario planning and doing something with it. It's managing the possible scenarios that could impact your business. So instead of using the past to predict the future, leverage transformation technologies to help provide clarity into what is happening now, what could happen, and how you will manage any of the possible outcomes. I'm quoting from a really good article where John Murphy, the CFO of Coca-Cola, talked about how you really have to move beyond just planning numbers and doing something. And John Murphy said, certainty or becoming comfortable with uncertainty requires mapping out possible financial scenarios, particularly in uncertain conditions, to begin to understand the trends that are here to stay versus the fads or the blips which will not. One thing that the Renaissance taught us is that, to quote a Forbes article from Ekaterina Walter, chaos creates urgency, and with it, an invaluable opportunity for us to redefine success and question our current structures. It forces us to seek an unusual and diverse perspective. It pushes us out of the comfort zone and creates white spaces to imagine something potentially breathtaking. Many CFOs viewed that chaos of 2020 as a justification to make some long-term technology investments on which they had previously been procrastinating. As with any economic crisis, the business world will be different once the crisis ends. The companies that evolve, innovate, and adapt will be well positioned to succeed. Those that keep their heads down and hope to ride out the storm are unlikely to survive. We all need to ignore talk of returning to normal because right now CFOs have the opportunity to create a whole new and improved normal. Final line from that article, it is likely a once in a career opportunity. So what does it mean to happen to the world? How can we take advantage of this once in a career opportunity? Well, companies have never left things alone. Companies sometimes fall into the mentality of if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but realize just because it ain't broke, it doesn't mean it can't be better. You want to build not for where you were or what has happened to you or what is happening to you. You want to build for where you want to be in the future. One last quote from that CFO of Coca-Cola when he was talking about scenario management. He said, instead of saying, here's a scenario, let's construct stuff around it. Here's a scenario, how are we going to manage it? These are the potential threats that we'll have, and here are the decisions we will need to make by when. Here is the implication that we'll have to allocate resources. In other words, look ahead, be proactive, make decisions about where you want to go. Don't spend your time dwelling on where you've been. Or if I may quote Littlefinger from Game of Thrones, chaos is a ladder. Or one more quote, Orson Welles from The Third Man said, in Italy, for 30 years under the Borgias, they had warfare, terror, murder, and bloodshed, chaos and uncertainty, but they produced Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, and the Renaissance. In Switzerland, they had brotherly love. They had 500 years of democracy and peace. And what did that produce? The cuckoo clock. So we saw a lot of changes happening over the last couple of years, and some of those accelerated and some of them went on a major pause in 2020. So here's our annual look at the usage of ERP systems. As a reminder, companies can select multiple products if they use multiple ERPs. So if you remember last year, we noticed a strong uptick in cloud-based solutions. This continues to be reflected in the data, even down here in that Lawson, aka Infor area. They launched a cloud solution. There was a buyout that happened of them back in 2020. Perhaps it's been good for them. You also see Microsoft Dynamics getting a boost when they finally got around to a cloud launch. SAP fell and their stock has taken a massive hit over the last year, but they have said they are going to pivot from being an on-prem company to trying to be a cloud-based company. So while they've been falling steadily over the last 5 years, as they try and come up with a cloud solution, we might see that turn around. There's an odd one on here. You'll see Workday decreasing slightly year over year. It's not substantially. It could just be because we tried to have a more representative sample of companies beyond just multinational conglomerates. It could also just be that their rise has been so substantial over the last few years, it was bound to hit a slowing at some point. But it's definitely the first year in our 5 years of doing this survey that we haven't seen a year over year rise. So here's a look at that same info separated out by vendor. So you can see that the Oracle line of ERP systems is changing over time in their share of the Oracle pie. Pay attention to that green one, for instance. But Oracle's overall dominance in the ERP space is just remarkable. Now, I'll remind you, because it's particularly relevant here, there is double counting in these data sets because we told people select all that apply. So there's nothing wrong with that. We certainly get a number of responses that selected more than one ERP system. We even have companies that have more than one Oracle ERP system. So maybe they had JD Edwards in one division, they bought another company, that division had PeopleSoft, their corporate standard was EBS. They lifted that to the cloud, but they haven't turned off all the EBS stuff yet. So now there's Oracle Cloud. That's how Oracle percentage gets to over 100% in 2021, which I think is the first time we've ever seen it cross the 100% line. So if you look back at that previous chart, you can see there are a lot of companies adding Oracle Cloud ERP. That's that green part up top into the product stack, but they're not necessarily removing the others. They're just adding it into what they're doing. That share just below the green on those top 3 bars, that's NetSuite. So again, cloud-based solution. Now let's look at a 5-year gap. So from the very first year we did this, when we took our survey data at the tail end of 2016 to where we are in 2021, the rise of cloud-based systems is really visible here. All of the big jumps are products that are either native cloud products or have released cloud versions. So if you look at the Oracle Cloud data, 3% of companies 5 years ago reported that they used what then was called Fusion. Today, that number is 25%. That is 700-800% growth in 4 to 5 years. It's pretty clear that the business world is converging around this list of ERP systems. We had some that were over 5% in prior years. Now it's fallen down to 0, 1, 2, 3%. So we moved the smaller ones, we just bunch them together down in that other category. But also notice how much the other category is decreasing. It's gone from what was essentially 20% 5 years ago to what is around 13% now. Cloud 5 years ago was not a given. People were still going, is this really kind of a flash in the pan? It is now, if you are not on the cloud, it is no longer a matter of if you're going to it, it's a matter of when, with one small exception I'll cover on the next slide. To be clear, no one voluntarily implements a new on-premise solution in 2021. No one says, you know what we should do? I'm thinking getting into the server and data center business is a good idea. There are a couple of exceptions to this, and I'll cover that in a second, where people just don't really feel they have good cloud tools, so stuck with the on-prem world. Cloud was not a given at the start of our survey 5 years ago, but it is definitely a strong, strong trend. So here you see from left to right, the level of effort and commitment to cloud migration. So at the left, we have companies who are avoiding the cloud as long as possible. And on the right, we have companies who have fully migrated. 100% of their solutions are on the cloud. As we have predicted and expected, oh, lo, these many years, the companies who are still thinking it over or moving slowly are seeing this sharp reduction, and those companies who are actively, even aggressively, moving to the cloud are becoming a whole lot more populous. There is an odd uptick this year. Look over on the left. Look at the companies in full avoidance mode. This had been trending downward. It was 0 with a bullet, and all of a sudden we saw a spike in the 2020 data. I think this is a side effect of just the chaotic year that 2020 was. I think some companies were really worried about solvency. Are we still going to be in business at the end of the year? So they put their brakes on all discretionary spending. Migrations, basically, let's just keep the lights on. They wanted to concentrate on other things for the time being. So I'm pretty sure that that group is going to go back down again, or those companies are going to go bankrupt and probably stop filling out surveys. So this chart shows, out of all the places where these processes have been implemented, what percentage of those are cloud-based implementations. A couple of years ago, for example, 17% of planning implementations were done in the cloud. Today, it's 27%. Now, I said earlier, no one voluntarily implements an on-prem solution, but not all of these are trending upward. To be clear, both Tableau and Oracle Analytics have desktop tools which it looks like are being rolled out and put into use. So this is not an on-prem server-based solution in a lot of cases. It's what people are installing on their actual machines. Like for Oracle Analytics, they're installing like data visualization desktop. Reconciliation is a process that on the whole has been on the rise in usage, but what you're seeing here is that a fair number of the new implementations of reconciliations are being done with BlackLine's on-prem solution, or they're being done within the ERP systems where they're putting RPA, robotic process automation, into an on-prem ERP like a PeopleSoft or an EBS. So it's eating away at the percentage of cloud implementations a little bit. So at the moment, you can think of it this way. The number of companies doing reconciliations, auto-reconciling, is on the rise. But overall, cloud-based implementations are not dominating that one yet. So I expect cloud-based solutions to strongly overtake on-prem implementations of reconciliations in the next couple of years, especially as some traditional on-prem solutions go rather rapidly into cloud and just stop supporting those on-prem worlds. Also, don't be shocked if someone buys BlackLine. Their revenue is under 300 million USD per year. They either need to get big fast or get acquired fast. Now, to be clear, I have no insider information, but I'm going to make a really bold prediction that Blackline, OneStream, and Anaplan will not be independent companies by 2025. So take a screenshot of this slide. It may not age well, but who knows? Maybe I'll get one. I'm hoping for all three right. So let me know in 2025 which of these three I got right, or if any get gobbled up between now and then, go, well, Edward got one right. We'll see if the other two actually happen. Okay, back to your regularly scheduled survey. So going back to the not going to the cloud right away, here is data around several of the reasons that people cited that people are concerned about migrating to the cloud. Now in these tables, rating 1 indicates that concern is not very important. 5, highest level of importance, like we talk about it in every meeting. What we're seeing over the last few years is an easing of anxiety about cloud migration. Where we were seeing really strong feelings in the past, we had literally 0 people, 225 plus surveys, 0 people clicked either 1 or 5 in a single one of these categories this year. That has not happened in prior years. The areas that remain of greatest concern are around the difficulty/cost of getting migrated, the prospect of checking release notes every month to find out what's changed, having to deal with that on a regular basis. On the flip side, we asked people, what about the advantages of being on the cloud? And you'll see, for the most part, that similar easing of passions. Time heals all wounds except the belly button. So you'll see that you're not seeing a bunch of 1s and 5s, just like on the concerns chart. With one exception, the only area where feelings are still strong about the advantages is on the question of whether companies are going to be able to reduce their on-prem IT footprint, either people, servers, data centers. People are still thinking that's a pretty important question, and they're mostly excited about it. Few IT people have gotten in here and said, yeah, you're going to need more of us. You're not going to need fewer of us. You actually see a couple down there at the 1s as well. Other things you see cited, ongoing innovation, which is that upside of all those frequent updates, not having to maintain servers scored really highly, managing security, total cost of ownership. So those are kind of the other areas pulling most of the remaining enthusiasm. Since it still has a pretty large market share, we did ask anyone with an older on-prem Hyperion EPM solution. So basically anything that's not version 11.2 on-prem. We asked those people, what are you going to do about it? You got a system that falls off premium support in December of 2021. So incidentally, we had a not applicable option, which was only selected by 30% of the people who answered this question, meaning that 70% of the respondents to this question are dealing with this issue. So over half of those companies just gonna bow to the inevitable, look at a cloud migration. Most of the others are gonna upgrade sometime between now and the end of the year to 11.2. There is this disturbing 5% who are planning to do absolutely nothing and stay on their unsupported version. I think this might also overlap with some of those other people just doing whatever they can to stay solvent right now, and they're going to focus, maybe they might be in the hospitality industry or the movie industry or something, but I believe they are going to get off it at some point. Just at the moment, they have other bigger concerns to worry about. So let's talk financial close for a little bit. So if you look at the change from 2019 to 2020 to 2021, we see a couple of things increasing. And for instance, you see Anaplan increasing as a consolidation system. You see Adaptive, Host, and OneStream all increasing as consolidation systems. They still haven't crossed the 10% barrier. That's because Host, to some extent, definitely swayed more towards the planning side, although they did have a consolidation component. Adaptive and Anaplan, definitely planning solutions. You do see a really big increase year over year in OneStream. So it was kind of 1-2% down in 2019 and 2020. They now shot up to around 6-7% of companies are using OneStream for their consolidation system. And notice SAP BPC has fallen through the floor. Hardly anyone, even if they're using SAP everywhere else, is using SAP to actually do their consolidation. We asked everybody how long it takes to close your books. So it's pretty clear. No one was at 0 5 years ago. 5% of companies now are either a virtual close or a continuous close. There's also this giant trend away from a 10-day close and going towards a 5-day close. So for the most part, companies are speeding up and they're moving to the left. It's not as clear here. So when you look at this, go, what patterns am I seeing? You see quarter close is significantly longer than monthly close. This is fine. If we're getting the data out to everybody internally within 5 days of the next month, so they have time to go act on it before the next month is already half over, that's great. If we want to take a pause to maybe add some footnotes, do some kind of quarterly things, figure out what we're going to say to the analysts and the stockholders, the investors, and not get that data out till 15 days, totally okay, as long as we're still doing the monthly portion of that close in 5 days or less. So because of that, you're actually seeing the 15-day mark taking its place as a common length. 10 days has actually given ground to 5 and interestingly 7. So you see these peaks at 5, 7, 10 has gone way down, but 15 has gone way up where it's almost number 1. Then you see 20. Faster close is in general the clearer trend, whether it's monthly or quarterly. The long tail, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45 days, those are getting shorter. They're coalescing, even those really long ones are really shortening down to about that 15 or 20-day mark. Let's talk integration. We asked people, how are you loading data into your planning systems, your consolidation systems, your reporting systems, your analytics systems? So there are a few on-prem solutions that scored really high. So going along with Oracle EPM historically being just the largest by market share, there was an on-prem solution that a lot of companies used from Oracle called Financial Data Quality Management Enterprise Edition, otherwise known as FDM. You do see it decreasing year over year. ODI has held pretty stable. That's Oracle Data Integrator. Keep in mind, there is cloud in here as well. So now Oracle Integration Cloud Services is getting lumped together with ODI as Oracle has made a dramatic shift over to that cloud world. Notice the biggest increase is in 2 bars. It's in EPM DM, which stands for data management, and in OneCloud, which I pointed this out in the past. I'm a fiduciary on that company. We looked into the detail of why EPM data management was growing, because it actually seems to be growing faster than companies are switching all their on-prem stuff to Oracle EPM Cloud. And what's interesting is people are using it not just to connect cloud to cloud products. It's actually this interesting combination where people are using it to load from cloud solutions like, I don't know, Oracle Cloud or Workday, and using it to load into their planning application. You also see people using EPM data management to connect to on-prem. So it's both being used as a cloud loading tool and an on-prem tool. So no surprise, data management has made a big leap over the last 2 years. It's becoming the de facto standard across all of Oracle EPM. You're going to see that FDM-EE decrease substantially. Planning is what a lot of you are curious about. A goal without a plan is just a wish. So let's take that plan, let's put it into a system, and here you have the lay of the land on what systems people are using for planning. So we have our usual suspects in the top 3 slots. You know, people always go like, what's the #1 budgeting tool on earth? It's like, well, if people are being honest with themselves, it's probably Excel, because inevitably they are taking their information, dumping it down into an Excel spreadsheet because they haven't worked out all the kinks of what the process actually is yet. But in terms of a real planning system, something that actually gives you a process and does the things we expect, like workflow and allocations and narration and reporting and dashboards, Oracle EPM holding steady at #1. You do see some other products moving up the charts. This is going to be a little easier to see on the next slide. So comparing the last few years. Look at the growth over the last few years in this revitalized Cognos. So this is IBM's solution. You also see SAP, Anaplan, Adaptive, OneStream, Host, all significantly higher this year. Essbase, however, is probably the biggest drop. It's just not popular as a standalone planning tool this year. To be clear, it is the engine behind Oracle EPM. And Oracle EPM launched a feature called Freeform Planning, which lets you have access to, if there's something you don't like in the planning application, you can go build an Essbase cube. You just do it through Oracle EPM. You don't need a standalone Essbase server anymore. It looks to me like people are focusing more on dedicated planning solutions rather than the raw computing analytics of pure Essbase. So they are still using Essbase substantially for building multidimensional cubes on the reporting side, just not trying to build custom spreadsheets on an Essbase backend. So we ask every year, what methods are you using to plan? And of the most frequently used planning methods, we're seeing not a lot of movement, although bottoms-up planning appears to be in a downward trend, which I'm really happy about because I've been preaching for years, stop planning dollar amounts. The more interesting thing to see here are the things that have in the past been not so prominent that for some reason have made really big strides from 2019 to 2021, meaning they did a bunch of changing during 2020. Look at beyond budgeting. It had this big boost along with predictive planning, range-based forecasting, which I love. Don't plan a single number. All you're doing is planning for that number to be wrong, plan a range. You also see this remarkably large jump in artificial intelligence. It is so large, in fact, this AI leap forward, I want to show it to you as a year-over-year delta from 2019 to 2021. AI has increased in terms of people using it as part of their planning by 1,789%. And God's blessed ranges, 290% increase. What's falling? The traditional methods. Drivers, bottoms-up dollar planning, just trending a number out, taking a top-down dollar and pushing it down. Across all industries, AI, artificial intelligence, in whatever form, machine learning, deep learning, it's streamlining operations, it's improving efficiencies. Automation alleviates repetitive tasks. Data analytics provides businesses with insights that we've never before thought possible. Natural language processing allows for intelligent search engines. We get helpful chatbots. We even get better accessibility for people. So these survey results may even be a bit understated because a lot of people noted that the business applications of AI have advanced to such an extent that they don't even realize sometimes when they're using it. We just live and work alongside of it every day. Think about it. Who knows you best? Is it your spouse? It's like, well, sometimes my spouse completes my sandwiches, sentences. Or pause for a second, and is it Google? Go into Google and start typing something, and Google quite often will finish your sentence for you, and it will be so amazingly accurate. That is AI at work. It knows what you and other people who've started sentences that way or started search queries that way are probably going to say next. So AI algorithms, algorithmic learning is here to stay. We've seen this coming for a good while. AI has arrived into our lives in the business analytics world, and not in generalized AI. Don't worry, the computers aren't going to rise up and kill us all. This is more specialized AI. But there is a big rise this year in people who say it's having significant impacts now. There is a steady percentage of people every time we ask who are always expecting it 2 years out. That is giving way. We still have a few holdouts who believe it's going to be 5 or 10 years, but we're running out of people who think it's never going to happen. It's one or two still said it, but it's probably gone in the next year. If we take a dynamic EPM approach, something that lets AI benefit our business, we are going to get new insights. We're going to help detect patterns. We're going to have responses to data in real time. We're going to incorporate predictions for future developments. This is from a Forrester survey. It illustrates that close to 70% of the benefits of AI accrues to operational efficiencies for companies, predictive analytics, fewer manual tasks, real-time monitoring, and the like. For companies looking to leverage AI, I'm a big fan of Harvard professor Dr. Mark Esposito, and he says, the first step is to look at which parts of your current operations can be digitized. Rather than dreaming up a magic bullet solution, consider existing tech that can free up resources or provide new insights. Or to put it a bit differently, don't go, oh my God, wouldn't it be cool if the computers could do this? And instead say, wouldn't it be cool if as a human, I didn't have to do this? So take something you're currently doing, let the computers look through large amounts of data, let them provide additional resources, or let them just do the manual grunt work so we can do as humans what we all got our degrees in college. Let's talk analysis and reporting. Planning and consolidation system is only really helpful if you get a number back out again. This slide, I apologize, is a lot busier than it has been in past years for a really interesting reason. We toss everything that doesn't hit the 5% threshold into the other category. And this year, TIBCO's Spotfire product, CSO Cockpit, Dodeca, they all topped that mark and made the chart. ArcPlan bless them, has made a comeback run. They got to 4%, so we just went ahead and decided to include it too. We may be seeing more of this in the future. ArcPlan was acquired, integrated into Longview, which was acquired by Insight last February, so you might see it popping back up. So all of these historically less well-represented technologies, along with narrative reporting, which has seen this monster increase in the last 2 years, they seem to be eating away in roughly even amounts at all of the leading systems, like using Excel or using Essbase for a reporting tool. The movement at the top is very interesting. So let's look ahead to the future that we imagine, that we want to bring into existence. So when we think about my predictions I made earlier, I talked about where things are trending. I talked about maybe Blackline, OneStream, and Anaplan are not independent companies by 25. But there are, my opinion, 3 areas where CFOs are going to focus a great deal in 2021. Number 1, communicating with context. You're going to see dashboarding and reporting take on this more story feel. As with any good narrative, there must be a beginning, there must be a middle, there must be an end. You have to take bias out of your tale. You have to give your story additional empathy, additional context, because that's what takes your business users and especially your decision makers, and that lets them more easily absorb and leverage the insights you're trying to convey. It's not enough anymore to say that something has happened. The why is vastly more important. And as Simon Sinek says, start with why. Second thing I see CFOs focusing on this year, this more holistic focus on company culture and integration. Without a strong culture, the survival of any company is precarious at best. 2020 proved that. Decisions on returning to work will be made in 2021. Will employees continue to work from home? Will they return to the office? Will they do some combination of both? Today, those answers aren't clear, but they will have an enormous and long-lasting impact on organizational culture. Additionally, organizations whose members are from different backgrounds will have access to a wider range of skills, different perspectives, different insights. Once we get people not just from our local area, but get them from around the globe, we're going to have increased problem solving. We're going to get better and faster business decisions. A better decision-making process results in increased profit. So when leaders ask, hey, can you come with me to meet the challenges of the day? Employees will recognize that their views matter, that their expertise is valued, that they're going to continue to solve some organizational problems. You're going to get this nice virtuous circle. So the first 2 help evolve the increased focus on proactive analysis of scenarios and possibilities. Keep in mind, the strategy game is an initiative game. It's a game of analyzing before an event rather than during or after. As the great Cylon Prophet #2 stated in Battlestar Galactica, all this has happened before, and all of it will happen again. There will be another catastrophic event, so take the time now to plan for how you'll respond to it so that you're not reacting in the moment. The time for complacency has died. How will you happen to the world? Because we have to change what we're doing. So this slide shows, out of all the people that report they're doing these processes at their company, what percentage of those are satisfied that that process, not the tool, but the process is meeting their needs. It does not look like y'all are happy out there with how your processes are going. So I want to see these trends going in the other direction. But what it looks like is 2020 exposed some flaws where people thought, our process is pretty good. We've lived with it for 25 years. It was good enough for grandpa, it's good enough for me. But they haven't been working. Now, to be clear, nobody has ever hit 50% satisfaction, but you're now seeing several different areas falling below a third. Analytics, dashboarding, visualization, reconciliation, all those used to be above that 1/3 level. I see a reckoning coming. As companies emerge from their COVID-19 induced, what I want to call it, emergency crash positions, hopefully their trade tables are stored, they are going to look to disembark. They are going to look to the future again. They don't want to be caught flat-footed again next time, so they're going to start planning for it. So you've got this pent-up demand where people want better working systems. They want better processes. Companies are going to have to rise to meet it. There is a new shakeup coming. It's going to be about companies taking a thorough stock in how they get things done. And where they're not happy, how can they make the changes that they need to happen? So take a breath and then go evolve your processes. Go think about what you're not doing and what you could be doing. Imagine if you arrived at your company today, what would you create? Just make sure you're prepared for that next sudden change and that you're not forced to, again, react in the moment. I want to quote Leonardo da Vinci twice. So I'm going to close with a quote from his, but I liked this one. I've been impressed with the urgency of doing. Knowing is not enough. We must apply. Being willing is not enough. We must do. Don't just be aware that you're unhappy with your processes. Go apply that knowledge to do something. I want you all, if you're going to focus on one thing for 2021 at work, focus on proactive scenario planning. Focus on how maybe you can take that older process and you can deliver it up into a built for 2021 and beyond cloud-based process. It begins with looking at how you're currently doing EPM, how you're currently doing business intelligence, how you're currently doing analytics. What are your environments? What are your processes? And then it's understanding, what does that cloud world look like? Because nowadays, a lot of what you used to have to build manually is just right there in the box. And third, come up with a strategy. If you need help, call me. I'm happy to support you because we have to have a path. We can't sit back and wait, or what will happen is there will be something else that we are reacting to and we will be unprepared to deal with it. As Leonardo da Vinci said, people of accomplishment rarely sat back and let things happen to them. They went out and happened to things. Thank you all for coming with me on what has been a 5-year journey across EPM and analytics. A lot of things have happened to us over those 5 years. So now it's time for us to go out and happen to things.